At the Crossroads, The Destiny of Choice by J.A. Carleton. Narrated by Jill Carleton. Introduction. Over the years, I've learned that everything that happens in our lives comes to us through choice, whether someone else's or our own. As children, our lives are affected by the choices made by others, sometimes on our behalf, sometimes on their behalf, with the children involved little more than barely considered possible casualties or beneficiaries. In a more esoteric way, these choices were ones that some scholars, theologians, and philosophers argue we are still responsible for, having made them before entering into this life. The concept is moot. We're here. The choices have been made. We must deal with them and the consequences of them. This book is about taking off the blinders and starting at the beginning by giving anyone who's ever felt powerless a reason to remember that no matter who's held it in the past, the destiny of each individual and the shape of their future is in their own hands. Everyone has the right to find fulfillment, joy, peace, love, and harmony, and everything encompassed by these concepts. Most of us have been raised to believe that in order to have these things, that someone else must be denied them. This is the second biggest lie of all time. The ingredients for what fulfills each individual or brings them joy, peace, love, and harmony is most likely as personal to them as yours are to you. And even if some of these things are the same, the expression of them might be different. And because of that idea and the nuances involved, one of the first things you must realize is that there is enough for everyone. It's true that 1% of the population holds as much or even more wealth than the rest of the 99% here in America. But consider that even though that's true, there's still more than enough for everyone. Why? Because not everyone has the same idea of what wealth is. That's the kind of nuance I'm talking about. For some, it's being able to sit on a toilet seat of gold, but for most, it's simply about having enough to be secure. That is a kind of wealth we can all achieve. Every choice we are presented with is a crossroad in its own right. Some are larger and will have potentially huge impact on the course of our lives. Others are tiny but may have just as large an impact. The choices we make change our personal destiny, who we think we are and who we allow ourselves to be. But we limit ourselves when we don't occasionally stop to check where we are, to check the intersection we're standing at and see if we're really headed in the direction we want to go. This is about stopping and using yourself and all the internal tools at your disposal to make the best, most positive choice at each opportunity. It's about learning how to listen to yourself and learning how to use the tools inside to create a destiny of each individual's choosing in accordance with energetic laws. No matter who you are and what choices you've made before, as long as you are alive, there will come more opportunities to become all that you've ever hoped you could be. All you have to do is know they'll come. And when you're faced with these choices, instead of acting rashly or under pressure from an external source, as may have been the case in the past, allow yourself to stop and truly consider the good, the bad, and the indifferent of each of your options. Whichever you comes to be in the wake of your choice, the key element is for that choice to have been yours, and yours alone. Everyone comes to the crossroads in their own time and in their own way. But even if the knowledge of how to navigate it sits in the back of their brain, everyone has the right to know that destiny is a matter of choice. Who are you to spout about my destiny or talk about my choices, you may wonder? Well, in a nutshell, believe it or not, I might have been there, or at the very least, deeply contemplated going there. I've made plenty of bad choices. I've taken some of the well-intentioned advice and tossed aside my own inner voice. I've drifted in seas of disassociated ennui and watched as sometimes those I loved tried to eject themselves from the world. And then I've battled with my disgust over their lack of foresight, even as my own floundered under the weight of years of disappointment. For good, bad, or indifferent, I did what was expected of me. I was expected to skid by in school, so I did. I was expected not to go to college, so I didn't. I was expected to be the lazy one, so I was. I was, however, also expected to be smart and accumulate knowledge, so I did. I fulfilled the expectations that others had for me. Some would say projected onto me, and somewhere along the way unlearned how to be the person my childhood self envisioned in the future. Well, I'm on my way back to that vision, keeping what works, tossing what doesn't, and doing my best to make better choices to get back to that positive vision. It's taken a lifetime to get just this far, but the journey's barely begun. Everything up to this point has been, in a way, hitting the local bazaar for supplies. Whatever equipment I don't have yet that I'll need, I'll pick up along the way. I'm sure of that now. So walk with me to the crossroads and see if any of the tools I have can help you on your journey. Told you it was brief. The hierarchies. In 1943, Abraham Maslow developed a hierarchy of human needs. By studying some of the most successful people of both history and his own time, he developed the following graph with the understanding that the higher levels cannot be reached without the needs of the lower ones being met. However, in many cases, somewhere along the line, often just above the basic physiologic needs, which is the lowest tier, we get partially stuck in the next level. So that even as we reach for the higher tiers, there's always a part of us that just doesn't seem to be able to completely move onward and upward. Figure 1 is Maslow's hierarchy as it was conceived to represent the ideally average individual. Maslow's hierarchy unrestricted Figure 1, wall number 1. In the lowest tier, we see physiologic needs addressed: food, water, air. The next tier up, we see safety, shelter, accumulation of goods. And then next up would be love and belonging. The fourth level is esteem, usually social. And then the fifth level, the pinnacle of the pyramid, is actualization of your highest self. In cases of individuals raised or living in an abusive or manipulative situation, the following pyramid, Figure 2, is a more accurate representation of these needs. Figure 2, Maslow's hierarchy of human needs with restrictions. Usually, the bottom level physiologic needs, food, air, and water, are what's usually met. The next level up, safety, shelter, accumulation of goods, is often inverted, with each successive tier also being inverted. When abuse has been the rule, both of the bottom tiers have been compromised, restricting access to higher level needs, such as love, preferably unconditional, and belonging. Esteem, both self and social, and the concept of self-actualization or the ability to attain the highest level of self possible is an idea so lofty that it is frequently beyond contemplation. In an ideally supportive household, each tier is solid, strong, and complete in and of itself, allowing for the individual to build their lives upward, experiencing each of these necessities in as stable a condition as possible. But in an abusive environment, there is no stability. Each tier is in a constant state of imbalance, precariously situated and ready to topple at the will of the abuser, which, in effect, keeps his or her victims under control. The three middle tiers of Maslow's pyramid, safety, love and belonging, and esteem, are what have been termed deficiency needs. The principle being that without them, individuals experience anxiety and increased tension. Whether it is subconscious or conscious manipulation, an abuser will keep his or her victims working so hard to obtain or secure these three needs from their abuser that achieving anything more is virtually impossible, unless and until the victim or subject is able to extricate themselves from the situation and begin to repair the damage done. Pyramid wall number 2, the energetic hierarchy, the foundations for a positive destiny, Figure 3. This hierarchy was built to represent energetic, or some would call them more spiritual needs of the individual. Spirituality in this case is not to be confused with religion. Religion and faith, in whatever form they take, have, from the dawn of humanity, enabled individuals to summon all kinds of strengths they otherwise would not have believed they possess. These energetic principles are meant to show individuals that the power of their own destiny comes from within, from choices they make on a daily basis. At the foundation, we have gratitude, which is the strongest foundation on which to build your positive future. The next level up is attraction and manifestation. Ask and ye shall receive. Also, be careful what you wish for. The next level up is grace. Accept that you can't change the past and turn your energies toward the future. The next level up is self-responsibility, owning your choices. And then finally we reach the pinnacle, which is harmony. Pyramid wall number 3, community support, figure 4. The following pyramid represents community and its role in the life of the individual. Constructive socialization can be particularly useful for individuals who have suffered isolation either from friends or family, a tactic frequently used in order to exert more complete control over those who may pose a threat to an abuser's self-proclaimed station. In this pyramid, the basic foundation is basic community interaction, leaving the house, shopping, movies, dinner. The next level up, organization interaction, church, synagogue, clubs. Next level up, moderate interaction, active involvement with an organization. The fourth level, purposeful interaction, taking part in leadership. And then the fifth level or pinnacle would be to become a leader yourself. The fourth wall, the one that actually gives the pyramid its stability, the one without which the others would be far less stable or able to perform their functions, should represent intellect and imagination both. The two are not mutually exclusive. Albert Einstein said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." It was imagination that led him to his famous theory. It was imagination first that allowed Da Vinci to conceive or visualize of both his machines and artistic works. Without imagination, the Wright brothers may never have flown, cell phones might not have been invented, or computers, and art would be non-existent. It's a fairly inarguable fact that it is the creative mind that has enabled our species to come this far. It's also fairly inarguable that creativity and its mate, curiosity, breed knowledge and comprehension. If we didn't have curiosity about how things work, we would have no desire to explore, which leads to learning. Without learning, we would not exist. But knowledge, imagination, learning, curiosity, and comprehension without compassion, without grace, are pale. Even imagination can be flat, devoid of character. It is the willful use of choice that colors all things imagined, known, learned, and comprehended. The question is, how are you going to choose to use your will? Pyramid wall number 4, intellect, imagination, figure 5. These 4 walls, ladders, levels of attainment, whatever you want to call them, provide the greatest stability for any individual to build a positive future for themselves and those they hold dear, now and in the life they choose to create. The bottom level represents basic knowledge, formal education, reading, writing, arithmetic, exploration of right and wrong, early cause and effect. The next level up is more specific formal education, introduction of philosophies, theosophies, moral gray areas, further reaching cause and effect. The third level up, active choices and early autonomy. The fourth level, constructive autonomy with positive impact. And the final level, grace. When choice becomes destiny, having taken in all the previous information about the hierarchies and how they relate to both your well-being and some of the obstacles you'll have to overcome, now is the time to finally ask the question, when does choice become destiny? The answer is, it starts to the very same minute you believe in it. But here's one catch, and there are a few. Destiny and the choices you make on its behalf is like a plant. It requires nurturing. If you think you're going to believe your way to president of XYZ Corporation and then not nurture the way to get there, shocker this, it won't happen. Let me guess, that's the story of your life, right? It was the story of mine. At least until I started truly contemplating and comprehending the meanings behind certain sayings and colloquialisms, and started to pay attention to the world around me. Once that happened, I started to notice things, and once I started to notice things that were pertinent to my goal, the more things came out of the woodwork to be noticed. Funny how it works like that, but that is how it works. What follows in the why is a combination of science, philosophy, and insight that came from the culmination of experiences thus far. The information contained in these pages will always be in these pages, so for now, based on who you are in this moment and who you are yet to become, understand, practice, and incorporate what you can, and when you're ready, the rest will come. After all, it's already here. Universal laws. Before we get into either of the laws that will be used here, there's one thing you must find a way to believe before you can believe in anything else, in your own power or in your own ability to create your destiny. Before you can believe that you can build a positive world for yourself and those whose lives you touch, you have to believe to the point that you know whatever you've survived can help you build a better future. There are some philosophers who will tell you that you chose this life and the things that you were going to suffer before you were born into it. You'll hear it whether you believe it is a matter of your personal choice. What I believe doesn't matter. What anyone else believes about this subject is irrelevant. What matters and the only opinion that counts here is yours. If you choose to believe this or disbelieve this concept, it doesn't make you better or worse, stronger or weaker. It doesn't make you more or less evolved. It's just an idea. Use it or don't, depending on whether or not it fits into who you are on your way to becoming. Once you know this and believe this fact, you will have excavated much of your guilt and self-recrimination and can begin to lay the foundation of a positive future. What are the universal laws? The rules that govern the interaction of energies in the universe. We're going to utilize two of the most important ones in this book. The law of self-responsibility. In childhood, a great many of the things we endure are brought to us by various authority figures, parents, family, friends, peers. These events are almost never the fault of the child. Our responsibility for the events in our lives begins in the early years of adolescence and ends when we're 6 feet under. The law of self-responsibility comes into effect as soon as you are able to know better and holds true with even more certainty once you have become what society considers a legal adult. At that point, the consequences of your actions are your responsibility. It's listed as the 4th tier up on the energetic pyramid because it's something many of us struggle with on a daily basis. To get to the point where it becomes your nature will take a lot of work and probably facing up to a lot of things you might not want or be ready to see. Like all the personal stages, they're all points to progress, just like we are all works in progress. This law is actually the most fundamental in that it helps the individual build their own supply of internal power. It's that internal power that helps provide strength when you begin using the first part of tip number 1, which is own your past. It also helps give the individual strength when it comes time to forgive past transgressions that others have made on you. It's the first step to honestly claiming or creating the life that's right for you. Each of us has to be able to acknowledge our actions and how they affect those around us. This consists of responsibility for all the intentional acts for either good or bad that we each have done. Power doesn't come from ignoring these things. It comes from acknowledging our faults to ourselves, if no one else. And, here's another key point, acting intentionally to do better in the future. A right life isn't about being perfect. My grandma used to say the only perfect people are dead people. A right life is about doing your best to make the most positive choices you can when you are presented with the option to make them. Honoring this law is what lets you look yourself in the eye and accept that from this moment forward, you will move into your future with integrity and sincerity. Once you make that choice, you'll find that so many others will come just a little more easily. You have the power. What is power, you might ask? Power is the capacity to perform effectively. In physics, it's the ability to do work. There are those who wield power out there in the world, those who can literally command the life or death of another human being. But the greatest power a person can have is power over their self. Think about this. What would you as a person think about someone who was able to rise above those who held power over others? Are they not more powerful than those who keep others in line, either physically, socially, economically, or politically by force or fear? I say they are, and I'm not the only one. I do say, however, that the power that I am talking about is inside you. It's inside each individual to claim, to use, or abuse as they see fit. The sword cares nothing for he who forged it. Its cleave is as indiscriminate to its smith as it is to the enemy against whom it is wielded. I'm here, this book is here, to explain why you should choose to use that power rather than abuse it. Gratitude. Grateful for what I have, but always willing to have more. Anonymous. True gratitude is more than just being able to acknowledge the good things you have. Far too many people have spent far too much time simply listing all the wonderful things they have in an effort to find richness in their lives by learning the art of gratitude. True gratitude comes from taking the time to contemplate how you have attained those things that you have, as well as measuring what you've done to get them against the ethics of the person you want to be. To some, gratitude is thanking God for the food on their plate, even though it was essentially their mother or father who went to work and earned money to purchase that food, then brought it home so it could be cooked and shared. They don't think about the people who make pennies a day doing back-breaking work tossing melons down the line, constantly in fear of losing their job, and then subsequently having to wonder where their family will get their food. They don't think about people who run the farms that are frequently under so much pressure to produce bigger, sweeter, juicier foods faster and at lower cost, so that the corporations who decide whether or not to buy their foods or fruits can make bigger profits while cutting the share that the actual farmer and his family make. To some, gratitude is finding a quarter on the ground that will enable them to take a bus home on a sub-zero night so that they don't have to walk a dozen blocks in the bone-chilling cold and risk not being able to go to work the next day because they caught a chill. To some, gratitude is for the people who helped a terrified parent find a missing child safe and sound at a friend's house. Sometimes it's being grateful that there's a warm blanket over you on a cold night. Sometimes it's the passerby who hands off a bus transfer that has a couple rides left on it. Sometimes it's the person who drops a few coins or even some paper money into an open guitar case on the street where a modern-day minstrel is performing. Sometimes it's something as basic as the ability to take a breath without feeling like you're drowning. The point is to look at these things you have. A roof over your head that doesn't leak, at least not all the time. Food in your pantry, even if it's just rice and beans. Clothes on your children. Think about where these things came from. Not just your hard work that put them there, but what qualities you have that enabled you to achieve at least this much and keep you striving to achieve even more. And more importantly, it's to look at all the people around you, the store owners, the construction workers, the employer, the co-workers, the spouses, the in-laws, the older kids, the clients who make your life possible. You have been programmed. We have all been programmed by the world and people around us. We are a product of a program that was a copy of a copy of a copy back into perpetuity, of a copy of a copy of a program. All along the way, there have been updates, usually controlled by some external, i.e. political, social, economic, religious force. But not a single one of us has written a completely new and personal program in eons. Fact is, most of us didn't even know we had that option. Well, we do. The first step in making any change is the realization that change is possible. If you dare to embrace the idea that personal change is possible, you will find yourself blocked, sabotaged, and discouraged at almost every turn. Your desire to rewrite your own programming must be stronger than any argument against it, even when the most powerful of those arguments comes from within the program you're already running. Before we go any further, there are at least 3 things you must know in order to make the best possible decision about the person you will become. They are homeostasis, knowns, and unknowns. The first thing you must understand is the idea of homeostasis. This is typically a term used in medicine. It's literally maintaining your body's status quo, keeping your respiration at a comfortable rate, your heartbeat at a steady pace, your body temperature at a safe constant. But there is both a subconscious and a conscious homeostasis as well. 88% of our daily lives are moved through without conscious thought. We get up, shower, make coffee, eat breakfast, dress, and go to work. We perform our job, return home, eat dinner, watch TV, check email, and go to bed, all largely on autopilot. neither fully aware or conscious of what we're doing, or sometimes even why. Subconscious homeostasis is a product of those automatic behaviors we do every day. For example, you're on your way home when your best friend calls or texts saying, "Happy hour, meet us." At that point, you're faced with a conscious decision that likely brings you back to the moment, weighing the joy and stress relief of happy hour with friends versus the early night sleep that you are going to get in order to feel more refreshed for that big meeting or presentation tomorrow. It's very likely that if you have a history of joining your friends for happy hour, that you will do it again. The choice is not even a choice. What you will likely experience is a subconscious homeostatic drive to go join your friends. You know you will overindulge, you won't sleep well, and you'll feel like crap tomorrow as you move through your presentation or meeting, just like you've done an untold number of times before. You do this because the consequences of happy hour on the eve of a big presentation or weekly meeting are what's considered in your life known. In all likelihood, it's been so long since you've actually managed to get home and go to bed early that you're no longer sure if you can function optimally without the ritual of a prior night's happy hour. You tell yourself that if you went home and got to bed early that you'd most likely just toss and turn, wondering how the presentation or meeting will go. Then in fact you'll lose sleep because you didn't take the necessary step of having one or two too many cocktails that ensures you're out like a light as soon as your head hits the pillow. You have now not only enabled your own subconscious homeostatic conditioning, but reinforced it as well by consciously justifying a negative effect known, instead of making a conscious choice to face what has become an unknown in the form of an early night of solid, chemical-free rest. Let's take this a step further and imagine that the meeting or presentation is not just another weekly hoop to jump through, but this time a promotion hangs in the balance. That promotion means an extra $10,000 a year, pushing you from $40,000 to $50,000 a year, which means you can afford to put that addition on the house, which will increase its resale value by at least $10,000 to $15,000, and you can afford to lease that new car too. That extra $10,000 a year puts you into a whole new tax bracket and headed toward financial security your parents never dreamed of. It's more money than you ever thought possible for you to make. So you make your fuzzy-headed presentation, or you miss a few key points in the meeting, and you blame it on the hangover fogging your mind. Across the table, a junior staffer brings up solutions to your missed points and gets the raise and promotion you've been angling for since you started in the mailroom. It's not fair, but it is your program. This isn't an example of flawed human behavior. This is an example of your programming headed toward financial security your parents never dreamed of. It's more money than you ever thought possible for you to make, working perfectly. So let's run a diagnostic on your program. You're 45 years old. You were an elementary school age child in the 1970s. You remember when candy bars were 25 cents and pretzel sticks were 2 cents at the local store. You remember penny candy, and you know that you were what was called upper middle class because your dad made good money. Probably about $18,000 a year. Perhaps you recall thinking or hearing someone say, or more likely you don't recall it, that making $40,000 a year would mean you were rich and easily, firmly upper class. And maybe when it came to those mysterious millionaires, you might have been told something like, "We're not that kind of people," or "Don't get too big for your britches," or "That kind of money changes people." Each of the above statements carrying a negative connotation that people with too much wealth were not to be trusted, or thought that they were better than the little people or average folk. All of the above sentiments came from an external source, probably a parent or other role model. It became a program, the inference being that you could make up to $40,000 a year and still be considered normal and therefore acceptable. So through this program, the number 40,000 slid through what we call a filter in your mind and into your subconscious mind. It became your wealth set point. Reaching that set point turned on homeostasis, and that point, that number, is where your subconscious mind will do everything it can to keep you, including sabotaging every effort to surpass that set point by keeping your subconscious focused on the result of behaviors whose outcomes are known, even if they are deleterious to your eventual prosperity. The subconscious mind doesn't care or know about the cost of living increases. It doesn't care or know about inflation. It doesn't care or know about the value of a dollar. It only knows it must keep you at your set point. When the day comes that the average minimum wage is equal to $40,000 a year, your subconscious won't care. You may barely be able to afford a 750 square foot one-bedroom apartment, but no matter what you do, you won't be able to break out of that $40,000 per year income bracket unless your program gets rewritten. Now let's take a look at the Junior Staffers program. JS was raised in an upper-class setting, taught investing during the Clinton years, where his modest savings spiraled into a high five-figure nest egg for him to use after graduating college. JS's father was a self-made man who escaped a hard-working but impoverished ghetto with a ravenous appetite for education and an innate knowledge that there had to be more. Nothing was ever enough. There was always more to be had, more wealth, more security, more knowledge, more everything. As a result, when JS was born, his father made sure to drill into him that no matter what the external forces were at play, there was no limit to what he could achieve. JS's degree landed him a position as an aide to a senior staffer who supported, nurtured, and cultivated his creativity and economic prowess. JS came to the table with his first financial set point being to land a $50,000 per year job by the time he was 28. He's currently 27, and he just landed that job. His next set point is to make six figures by the time he's 35. After that, he will have the investments, capital, and contacts to build his own company. He wants to retire by 60 with an 8-figure annual income. The odds are he will achieve a huge amount of the success he has been programmed to, if not all of it. Very rarely does the difference between success and struggle come down to the intellectual prowess of an individual. It is, in fact, our programming to a large degree that even determines our learning power, the limits of our intellect. Knowns, whether they are good or bad for us, we will choose them at every possible instance, so long as we are acting without conscious direction. And sometimes even when we think we are, we still choose a negative effect known over an unknown. Why does a smoker continue to smoke even when they know it's not good for them? Because they know what to expect when they light a cigarette. They know the first cough will come right after the first drag. They know the back of their throat will sear with chemical fire burning through the mucous membrane, leaving the tissue weakened and stressed, and eventually subject to the cancer that will set up shop in his or her throat. Unknowns. Knowing is only half of the problem. The other half of the problem is the fact that what will happen to the smoker when they quit is an unknown. They don't know how they will feel in the morning. They don't know what they will do while they have the first cup of coffee. They don't know how it's going to feel being able to run up and down the stairs without being winded. They don't know what they're going to do with the money they're not putting towards cigarettes. Fear of unknowns drives the subconscious homeostatic program, even when the results of a known behavior are detrimental to the being of an organism as a whole. The self-sabotaging exec who can't break past $40,000 per year doesn't know what it's like to be a millionaire, and subconsciously doesn't want to know. $40,000 a year is comfortable. The status, the purchasing power, it's all known. What will happen if they suddenly make $50,000 a year is unknown. The program that anyone who makes more than $40,000 a year is too big for their britches, or that kind of people, coupled with an internalized negative connotation, keeps the individual's wealth set point at $40,000 per year. All the information contained here is simply meant to provide an alternative view and a few coping strategies that may help others find their way to their own life of wellness, satisfaction, and fulfillment that all sentient beings are entitled to. My life, like yours, is a work in progress. Like all people, I too experience good times and bad times. One of the most important keys to building a life of satisfaction and fulfillment is to keep the bad times reduced to the barest possible minimum, while increasing the duration of the good times to their maximum potential. Add this to the number of things you have in your life that bring you joy, and what you have, in the language of power, is a multi-phase source for fulfillment. That source is your mindset. Is it a growth mindset, or is it a fixed mindset? Look up Carol Dweck, Dweck, and Fixed Mindset versus Growth Mindset on YouTube. It all starts with you. Rather than filling these pages with the same old hashed and rehashed bits, let's get them out in the open now so that you're able to decide just how ready you are to move forward. There is no right and no wrong. There is no, you must do this now. All these steps are yours to take or leave at the convenience of your life. The most important part is that with this information, you're armed for a life you're worthy of, at whatever time you choose to begin. Following is a list of physical equipment you will need to begin your journey. Calendar and a pen. The following is a list of emotional equipment you will need to begin your journey. Belief that you are worthy of a fulfilling and satisfying life. Desire to build that life. Expectation that you can do anything you set your mind to. Determination to stand against those who would sabotage your efforts, including you, no matter what ghosts, insecurities, and past failures they may dredge up and throw into your face. The most important thing to know about making changes from who you were programmed by others to be to the you who's going to write their own new life program is permission. That permission can only come from one source, you. I'm here to open your eyes to your own potential. It's a gift that was given me by my mother and one I hope to pass forward. As we did when we were children, let's start with the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. These are the building blocks to your successful recovery of who you are meant to be. A, acknowledge, and most importantly, accept that you are worthy of self-direction and fulfillment. This means you'll often come face to face with the indoctrination others have used to stifle, control, and manipulate you all your life. It's at this point that you'll need to decide whether or not you're going to keep the ideals, ideas, and programming of others used to make you into who they wanted you to be, or if you're going to rewrite your own program to be who you want to be. You will also need to decide, as you inspect the code of your programming, what you find worth keeping and what needs to be rewritten. Only you can do this. Only you have the right to do this. B, budget. Budget your resources, the computer, family, friends. Budget your money, and most importantly, budget your time. Set aside whatever time you need each week to pursue the person you feel you are meant to be. And C, create a plan. Use a notebook, calendar, calculator. Get a list of those who have succeeded before you together. Set a time frame. Like, by next week, I'll have 5 letters of introduction ready to go to my potential mentors. In 1 year, I'll be an apprentice. In 2 years, I'll be in X position. 10 years after that, I'll have XXX resources, income, position. Any self-help guru will tell you that writing down your goals dramatically increases your chances of success. Why, you might ask? Simple. You're training your subconscious to accept changes to its programming. Writing is an ideomotor activity. Once we've learned the mechanics of writing and have developed our handwriting style, the actual use of cursive becomes subconscious. We can address our own subconscious mind by writing out our goals and seeing them in our own writing. By doing this, we open the filter of our mind to the possibilities of achieving these goals, slowly turning them from unknowns to knowns, effectively reprogramming ourselves to a new level of personal achievement in any endeavor. The CAPAS mental bank system is one of the most consistently successful models of this kind of personal reprogramming. When you look at the happenings in the world around you, ask yourself why they don't teach children cursive anymore. Could it be that by utilizing a writing system that helps grow the brain and its concurrent neural pathways, we could be raising smarter children? Those more capable of critical thinking? Those more capable of questioning the status quo? Could it be that there are those who hold the reins to our society that would want to make sure that the children who are coming up in this world don't have the mental capacity to question them? Or to question why things are done the way they are? Cursive is a tool that stimulates thinking. If your child's school won't teach it, perhaps you might think about teaching your child yourself. Now for the 1, 2, 3s. 1, research whatever it is necessary to achieve your goals. Is it more education? Is it more money? Is it more time? How much will you need to devote? How long will it take? What are reasonable expectations given what will be required? 2, secure your mentor. Your mentor should be someone who has achieved what you aspire to have or be. Most people, once they have achieved their own measure of success, are very happy to help the next generation do the same. Being able to pay our achievements forward helps assure us that our own efforts will not be forgotten, even if one day our name is. 3. Take the first step. After all the research and legwork you've done, you now know what to do. All you have to do is actually do it. So do it. Take the first step of your journey. What we'll find in subsequent chapters are the 10 simple steps that can help you stay on your task as you rewrite your program and become the person you know you were always meant to be. Number 1, own your past. Forgive, but don't forget. Forgive, forget, what's the difference? There are many folks who will tell you that forgiving means forgetting. These people are not ready to understand that forgiving means the opposite. That in fact, forgiving means accepting in spite of. Forgiving means trying to understand where a perceived transgression comes from and accepting it as part of the transgressor's nature. What one person, you, perceives as a transgression or hurtful act may well be a common response from the one who hurt you, and therefore by that person is not perceived as hurtful. It is up to you to determine whether or not you're willing to continue accepting responses that cause pain. If you decide you're willing to continue accepting responses from others that cause you pain, doubt, fear, anxiety, or reduced self-esteem, reduced personal sovereignty, then you must be prepared to accept the consequences of pain, doubt, fear, anxiety, reduced self-esteem, and reduced personal sovereignty. There is no getting around that fact. If you wish to accept someone else's judgment of your worth, then you have, until such a time as you reclaim your right, given your esteem to someone else to measure and value or devalue according to their yardstick instead of your own. Forgiving frequently means examining, weighing, and accepting something that it may very well be contrary to your personal nature to accept. Forgiving requires knowledge of the person and the reasonings behind their actions, as well as a deep knowledge of self, usually revolving around whether or not you're in a position to make changes that you desire. Forgiveness also means frequently extending your own ability to empathize or sympathize with someone else and whatever may have been plaguing them at the moment they lashed out. For those who argue that forgiveness equates to forgetting, I will tell you here and now that this is not so. Forgetting a perceived transgression is virtually impossible when it accompanies personal pain. It is too connected to the person who hurt you. Forgiving is a vastly different state of mind, and one that it is essential to bring into the home of your heart. You can forgive without forgetting. In fact, you should not forget. To paraphrase the immortal words of Santayana, those who forget the past are usually doomed to repeat it. Truer words have never been quoted or misquoted. Forgetting a transgression against yourself, your sovereignty, your person, is the same as denying that any such event ever happened. If that is a choice you enter into willingly and with knowledge and understanding, that is certainly your choice. If it is a mindset you are encouraged to take at the behest of someone else, then it is one you'd do well to think over several times. Forgetting leaves the door open for others to commit the same transgression against you. Forgiving leaves the door open for you to make more well-educated choices about who you let influence your life based on the experiences of the past. Would you choose to have amnesia and perhaps waste time living all your programming mistakes again? Or would you prefer to walk into the light, educated, accepting of the mistakes you've made, and knowing that you are armed for better decisions to create a future that is truer to your nature? 2. Claim ownership of your future. The faults of a superior person are like the sun and the moon. They have their faults, and everyone sees them. They change, and everyone looks up to them. Confucius. Stand up to your past. This is always easier to do once you have faced and owned it. Your past is the weapon your detractors will use against you to try and dissuade you from making positive changes. Your past is what your own inner voice will throw into your face to remind you of your perceived failures, or those moments when you were less than perfect. This is the time to acknowledge a realization and to take a vow. The realization: perfection is an inherently unattainable state. The vow: the idea of perfection will have to be modified to one of excellence. Perfection is unattainable. Whether you subscribe to a religion or dogmatic belief system or not, the only perfection that exists is numeric. We, as sentient, cognizant beings, have a creative, rationalizing capacity that allows variances in accordance with the rational mind's attempts to quantify emotional and perceptive experience. These variances, in and of themselves, disallow the idea of perfection as something within the realm of the human experience. Excellence, however, is dependent upon the moment, the circumstances, and any number of Newtonian and quantum variables. Therefore, excellence is an outcome to be aspired to, always within the constraints of the moment and all its applied variables. Within those variables, a state of excellence is utterly achievable thanks to its very mutability, whereas striving for perfection is a setup for certain failure. Are you who you want to be? If yes, great. If yes, but, even better. If no, then let's get going. The first thing you should know is that your friends, family, and closest confidants will most likely be all too eager to help you sabotage your attempts to live a life that's truer to who you are. Just as your body has its own homeostatic set point, the point of healthful balance where everything is running and functioning as it should, so do your friends and family. And like it or not, you as you are, or as they've programmed you to be, are part of their homeostasis. It's like when you go on a diet. They'll pat you on the back and say, "That's great, let me know how I can help. Hey, you want to go out for happy hour?" It's not that they're necessarily intentionally sabotaging you or setting the stage for you to sabotage yourself, although sometimes that's true. But the truth is, it's even more likely that they don't necessarily realize what they're doing or what effect it'll have on you. This is where you need to make sure that you're acting consciously and actively choosing the unknown over the known. So, very much like when dieting, this redefined life you're building, this truer version of yourself, is done from within. And the odds are you'll be far more successful if you take care about those you share your goals with. Accountability should always be maintained with yourself. If you fall off or slip up, in the dieter's vernacular, accept it and move forward. It really is that simple. The whole point is that you don't need permission to be true to yourself. We've just been conditioned, indoctrinated, and programmed all throughout history to think we did. It's time to wake up and be the person it makes you happy to be. And from you, others will learn that they too are entitled to this miraculous gift. You will become the light to show the way. Number 3, identify and define exactly who you want to be. Competition. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music he hears, however measured or far away. Henry David Thoreau. It is the nature of humankind to grow through challenges and competition. How many of us haven't ever heard the phrase, keeping up with the Joneses, in reference to getting that new house or new car or newest satellite or techno gizmo? Have you ever asked yourself why? What does this focus on someone else's state of existence truly have to do with you or the satisfaction you garner from your own? Why should your measure of self come from what someone else has or doesn't have? Because that's what corporations, advertisers, and the media have programmed us to believe. Every time you turn on the television, you're confronted with happy, beautiful people who have the things you want. Advertising is nothing more than programming associations into your subconscious, very like a hypnotist who, with your permission, helps you reprogram yourself to allow the changes you seek to actually take place. Advertising uses sight, sound, and sympathy to achieve its objective, inundating the individual with literal, subliminal, and fantastical, as in fantasy, images. Catchy jingles create brainworms, and particular colors access particular areas of the brain to drive action. Typically, reds, oranges, and yellows, warm colors, can spur a person to physical action, raising blood pressure and temperature, whereas blue and cool colors have the opposite effect, usually implying relaxation, recreation, and low-energy activities. Once you become aware of how the media is programming you, you can make the best choice based on empirical data rather than emotionally charged manipulations. You'll be surprised what you discover once you start paying attention to the gimmicks. Fact is, advertising in media is one of the most deeply rooted transgressions against individuality and self-determination that exists. The measure of the individual against themselves as the person they are versus the person they want to be is the only genuine measure that matters. It's a very hard fact to swallow, and one that many people won't want to. It's so much easier to compare yourself, your haves and have-nots, to somebody else's. It's so much easier to blame someone else for what you don't have than to admit the cause of your lack lies in your own program. The one thing you must know about this state of existence is this: we all do it. The only harm in living this way is the harm that comes to the self. That harm is geometrically multiplied once an individual realizes that the only person responsible for their life is their self, and that individual continues to lay blame where it does not belong. In 2006, a book called The Secret by Rhonda Byrne was published. It took the world by storm, promising that the law of attraction, being what you put out to the universe will come back to you, if used properly, will result in your happiness, success, and bliss. In a way, the entire book is a huge oversimplification, and yet it can work. It can work because as soon as you set your mind to a task or an achievement, your subconscious begins to puzzle out how to attain or obtain your objective. It frequently fails because the surface tenet of live like you have what you want as the interpretation of cause fails. Consider that it may be inaccurately interpreted. Instead, perhaps the tenet should be live like you are who you want to be. Change begins within, and the law of attraction requires action. Basic philosophy holds that if you are not satisfied with who you are and what you see in the mirror, then it is you who must begin to make the changes necessary. In screenwriting, we use an external antagonist or a set of circumstances to force our quote-unquote hero, this would be you in the movie of your life, to break free of his or her status quo, slog their way through the mire of rational actions until every one of them has failed, leaving the hero no other choice but to embrace change and become what they must in order to succeed against the bad guys. Reality is rarely so dramatic. Most of us slog our way through the mire of rational actions over and over, failing over and over again until we just give up. That's the sad truth. It's not that we're not capable of becoming the hero we want to be. It's that we don't know how to use the tools we have to make the change. We think we need an outside force to push us into becoming the hero, but when that happens, we resent it. And since our movie never ends until we do, we're stuck being what others want us to be. No matter what we try or what the testimonials tell us have worked for so many others, we only find the results when it comes to ourselves to be less than stellar or simply temporary as we backslide into our original program. Contrary to what you might think, this is not failure. This is evidence of our script working perfectly. If you want to be the hero of the movie of your life, then you must change your script. It starts with thought, and that frequently starts with asking hard questions and facing even harder truths. Preferably those answers come from within you and not from the dogmas and expectations and voiced disappointments of those around you. Quieting the voices of others so that your own can be heard is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Once you know who and what you want to be, the next step is to find yourself a mentor. Your mentor will almost always be someone who came before you and managed to accomplish exactly what you're wanting to do for yourself. Most people who have achieved their goals love sharing how they did it. It seems to be a fairly general rule of those who attain success that there is a need to pass on the way in which they achieved what they have. This is true for every kind of success there is, from spiritual to corporate. Everyone who succeeds in living this life is driven to pass forward the things that they deem most important for continuing their success within another generation. It's the same reason we're compelled to pass on our genes as a species. Passing this information forward becomes our own brand of immortality. So, who do you want to be? Number 4, set reasonable goals. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Confucius. Once you've broken your goals down into small, manageable steps, it's much easier to begin walking the path that honors your true self. Real life gets in the way. But I just can't do what I want. I have obligations. Odds are you do. So do I. And yet my first obligation is to myself. Without honoring myself, I'm incapable of truly honoring those around me. If I cannot pursue my passion, I cannot be genuinely happy for someone else who is pursuing theirs. In all fairness, I'm extremely lucky and very grateful. I have a day job that's incredibly fulfilling, and I'm lucky enough to work with an outstanding group of people. I'm also lucky enough to have a wonderful clientele, most of whom prefer to find the silver lining even in their misfortunes than to dwell on the darkness of them. Everybody knows negativity is contagious. One person's bad mood can affect everyone's if you let it. But why should you? Why should you allow yourself to be victimized by someone else's pessimism? You shouldn't. It's hard not to let someone else's mood affect you, but it is worth the effort to try. Instead, remind yourself of all the great things you have or the great things you're building into your life. And remember that someone else's troubles are not yours to bear. You're not a pack mule for someone else's baggage. You can be sympathetic and empathetic, but you cannot run their life. It is up to the individual to want to change what's wrong with their life. You can't do it for them. What you can do is lead by example whenever possible. When someone tries to infuse your mood with negativity, you can politely decline to converse on the subject or politely remove yourself from the area. You can choose to let yourself become mired in trouble, or you can choose to focus on those things you have control over, yourself and your own attitude. One of the most obvious times this kind of situation occurs is with family during the holidays. The people who push your buttons, forcing you to push theirs back, are exactly the kind of knowns or known behaviors that it's hardest to break from. But what if you did? What if you chose the unknown avenue of letting someone spout whatever they could just to get a rise out of you and not giving them the satisfaction of it? Or, if you're the meek and mild one who keeps your mouth shut to keep the peace, what if you did voice your opinions but managed to keep it positive and civil? It's unknown, but so was the Western world once. The first strategy of de-stressing your holiday distress is to accept that the people who push your buttons do so because it's in their script, their program. You have always reacted the way you did because of your program. But now you're in the midst of rewriting it. You have more power than they think, and it's your duty to yourself to think and act as the person whose program you're writing, rather than reacting as the one whose script they wrote. This is your power. Your holiday. You've lived through the drama before. You know each person's script. You know their characters, their flaws, their strengths, and now you know your own. Having this information gives you the psychological shield called objectivity. You can now use your conscious knowledge to deflect attacks against yourself. As long as you own your past, it cannot be used as a weapon against you, and to rise above the desire to retaliate. You have the power to accept that those around you are only acting in perfect accordance with their life scripts or their programming. But you are free to make active choices in your behavior rather than deal with the aftermath of knee-jerk reactions. This is your power. This is you, leading by example. Chapter 5, or tip number 5, health matters. Let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. Hippocrates. Be your own healthcare advocate. Your body is your temple, your palace, your vehicle, whichever fits your concept of it. Know that you and only you are responsible for gaining and maintaining your health. Many can aid you in this quest for health, but only you can perform the acts necessary. When I was a young girl, I can easily recall having conversations with various family members about diseases and cures. Usually these conversations took place around the time I was due for school-required vaccinations, and though there was a negative experience behind my assertion that I didn't need vaccines, there was a deeper belief at the center of my so-called argument. The belief I'm talking about was a single, simple gut instinct that whatever disease nature created or allowed to exist, nature could cure too. The negative experience I'm about to share will probably be considered almost comedic by some. But consider both the mindset of a middle-aged doctor as well as the mindset of a 7-year-old female in the 1970s. At 7 years old, a normal child is self-aware. Within the realm of their experiences so far, they know what they like and what they don't. By 7 years old, the odds are a child has learned at least some of the basics of etiquette, proper behavior, and modesty. Also by 7 years old, many children have at least a rudimentary understanding of what respect is, both for self and for others. Taking the above statements into consideration, and the fact that pediatricians are doctors who specialize in children, consider the following true story, then consider how you would feel if it had been your experience or your child's. In the mid-1970s, I was brought to the doctor for a booster shot before starting the school year. It wasn't the shot I had a problem with. It was the fact that I had to pull my pants down in front of somebody else to receive it. At this stage, I was already subject to teasing from both family and peers about being chubby, and as a result of that, I became extremely modest, especially when the situation was out of my control. So, sitting in the doctor's office with my mom, I decided that the shot would be administered in my arm rather than butt. So when the doctor called my name, I stood tall and confident and told him where he could stick the needle. His reply was something along the lines of, "That's not how it works. This one goes in your tush." To which I, as a precocious child, replied, "Then I just won't get it," or some such thing. At this point, the doctor simply pulled my pants down and gave me the shot in the rump. We were still in the waiting room. It was a moment of humiliation that 40 years later I still recall with obscene clarity. All in the name of a booster shot. My personal sovereignty was violated, and I was literally stripped bare-bottomed in front of the world. Now, all things being equal, there are many children who regularly suffer much more horrifying indignities than this could ever be seen as. But given this tiny little indignity, I cried as if I'd been beaten, and my mother never brought me back to that doctor, just so you know. All it takes is a little imagination to develop sympathy and empathy for all those kids out there who are regularly victimized by people who are supposed to protect them. There are a few points to the above story. The first being that the doctor didn't even try to explain that it was more effective or efficient to give a booster shot in the butt. Maybe he thought I was too young to understand, but the odds are that he, being a white male in his 60s at the time, was probably not keen on the idea of being questioned by a 7-year-old female. Some may see that as a grand assumption on my part, but if you didn't live through the 70s and experience the mindsets and mentalities of those who came of age before then, you can't really understand what I'm saying. In the 70s, doctors were still considered by many to be about as close to gods as humans could get without being some kind of clergyman. After all, doctors knew about the body, how it worked, and they had a reputation for saving lives. Dr. Kildare, Ben Casey, Marcus Welby, MD, they're just a few of the examples of the doctors as near God in popular culture. MASH, the show about a surgical team in war-torn Korea, was a groundbreaker, not just because it tackled so many pertinent issues from women's rights to bigotry to addiction, but because in spite of the fact that these medical professionals frequently performed surgical miracles, they were written and portrayed as simply deeply flawed human beings, just trying to do the best they could to help others while living in impossible circumstances. What's the point of all this? Doctors are just people. They're trained in the workings of the human body and how to fix things that go wrong, especially when it comes to trauma. Most of them are excellent when it comes to handling the mechanics of traumatic effect. What more than 95% of medical doctors are not good at is prevention, maintenance, and relating to their patients. A hugely disproportionate amount of class time for a doctor is spent on biochemistry. Honestly, so they can learn more accurately how and what to prescribe to their patients to keep them and their conditions managed. Check out who subsidizes medical schools and where the grants come from. The pharmaceutical industry is a multi-billion-dollar per week business. Chemotherapeutic agents alone in America are estimated to earn pharmaceutical companies upwards of $4 billion per week. This is an obscenely conservative estimate. The fact is, pharmaceutical companies don't want people cured, they want people and their conditions managed. They want sick people kept alive and their conditions controlled enough so that they can continue working. If they're able to continue working, they can continue paying for their meds. Then, as the meds become less effective at controlling the condition and symptoms return or grow worse, more meds are introduced with a whole slew of possible side effects that need to be managed by more drugs made by the same pharmaceutical companies. It's a controlled spiral descent that leads people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, often living on fixed incomes. I mean, when was the last time you heard of a senior citizen or retiree that was actually enjoying their retirement and the fruits of their lifelong labors, rather than fighting to stave off the effects of chronic conditions? Frequently requiring multiple medications at multiple times a day to manage symptoms rather than cure the diseases that they have. Historically speaking, in America, there have been at least a dozen researchers, doctors, and biochemists that have developed cures for everything from diabetes to heart disease to almost every kind of cancer. The powers that be here in America have done everything they can, from harassment to manufacturing and disseminating false information, to discredit them and chase them out of our country. After all, there's approximately $4 billion a week at stake. So when it comes down to anyone who suggests that a better, healthier life can be yours for the taking simply by treating your personal organism as a whole and feeding it the appropriate fuel instead of genetically modified and hyper-processed foods laden with sugar and high fructose corn syrup, they're ridiculed, called hippies or crackpots, and most certainly blacklisted among medical and pharmaceutical establishments. Again, taking all of the above into consideration, there are times when medicines are wholly appropriate and necessary. But you don't take antibiotics for a cold, and any doctor that prescribes them to you for one isn't holding up their end of the Hippocratic Oath. A cold is caused by a virus. Antibiotics are effective against bacterial agents, not viruses. One last word on doctors. Most of them get into medicine because they are driven for some reason to help. Yes, it's lucrative once they pay off the couple of $100,000 in debt. But for the most part, doctors and medical practitioners do deserve the same respect that every other living creature deserves. So with regards to your health, if you are interested in keeping it, you have to bear the responsibility for regaining and maintaining it. This is just part of my personal journey as well. We've grown accustomed to the idea that a cure is a one-time thing, a pill, an IV, a shot, and that once the cure is administered, we can go back to the habits that created the situation in the first place. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The cure is nothing more difficult or simple than restructuring the habits that created the situation in the first place. Taking care of your body with healthy fuel can and will change your life, your health, your mental clarity, your longevity, well, every aspect. From your energy levels to your sexual prowess, which will skyrocket. And instead of feeling bogged down and bloaty in the belly, your steps will be filled with vigor. A vigor you probably haven't had since your teen years. Next, we'll build a foundation for your new life. Self-medication. Most of us do it with food. Many of us do it with drink. Lots of others do it with drugs, whether legal or illegal. I was the kid who ate powdered sugar out the box. It's now only 40 years later that I understand why. The blood sugar ups and downs, the effect all those empty calories had on my happiness hormones, and the fact that I would stuff myself until I wanted to puke, but never felt satisfied. There are so many things that go into the feeling of satiety that there are books and movies and documentaries made about it all. So for this work, I'll simply restate a couple of things that are available for the finding out in the electronic world. You can eat 3 pounds of fast food and never be truly satisfied, or you can go ahead and eat a normal meal full of foods that are one step away from where they were grown or butchered, and maybe even indulge in a little dessert, and feel fully satisfied until your next meal. Why the difference? Nutritional content is one of the factors. Your body simply can't squeeze enough nutrition out of the fast food to keep it running well. All it's able to pull out is fat and high fructose corn syrup that makes you feel high for a little while. Your stomach has nutrient receptors in it that determine when you've consumed enough nutrients, minerals, vitamins, phytochemicals, proteins, for the time being, so that it signals you're satisfied. When you don't get the quantity of nutrients you need to function optimally, like what comes out of fast food or highly processed foods, you can actually gorge yourself and be starving yourself all at the same time, which is why you never really feel satisfied when eating junk food. One of the other factors is simply stretch receptors in the stomach. When you put a large amount of bulky food like fresh fruits and vegetables, high fiber foods, lean proteins, and healthy fats into your belly, they're nutritionally valuable, and you literally get fuller, which activates the stretch receptors in the muscles near the top of the stomach, which signals the brain to tell you to stop eating. You've had enough. If those receptors don't get activated, it's much harder to feel full for any length of time. So the first thing you must consider if you're serious about taking control of your health is what kind of fuel you're putting in your vehicle. Give it a shot. Challenge yourself for 3 weeks to eat nothing but products that are one step away from how they were picked or plucked or slaughtered. Above all else, give your body a chance to rest and recover from the processed and specialty beverages. Try eating like this for 21 days. Note how you feel, how much energy you have, whether or not you need a nap in the afternoon or you just want to enjoy one. If you don't note positive changes in your personal palace, you can always go back to making the fast food corporations rich. And for the record, that one step away does not necessarily mean raw, especially when it comes to meat, poultry, or fish. Anything like that, make sure that it's all, or pork, make sure that it's all cooked to a suitable temperature. Thermometers are relatively inexpensive these days, and the digital ones are better. Tip number 6, stress management. Give yourself to the dark side. It's the only way to save your friends. Darth Vader. Drawn to the dark side. We're indoctrinated to the idea that the sacrifice of self is the most noble act we can commit. In certain situations, like the defense of another, taking a stand for the betterment of society, etc., that can be true. But in most of the situations each of us will encounter in our daily lives, it's a grotesque falsehood. How can a parent raise a child that has not only respect for his or herself, but for others too, if the parent never shows respect for themselves or their needs? The denial of your own needs as a human being in order to satisfy the sacrificial requirement of being a parent frequently leaves people burnt out and desperate. It also teaches, in particular, your female children that their needs don't matter when pitted up against someone else's. Though it's a strong message, it is not the right one. There is, of course, also a dark side to self-care. It can degenerate into hedonism and the far too prevalent "hooray for me, to hell with you" attitude that we see everywhere, from the political arena to public venues. The media doesn't help. Avoiding the dark side is as simple and as difficult as finding and maintaining balance. When you care for, nurture, and honor yourself, you set the example for your friends and family that they are worthy of granting themselves the same respect. When your friends and family are competent in tending their own needs, then the capacity and ability to nurture each other becomes a joy instead of a duty. Fear and doubt. These two conditions are the anchors of the dark side. Their aim is to weigh down the lofty ambitions we have for ourselves and to keep us grounded in reality. Both of these conditions are spawned from outside of us and internalized frequently before we take our first steps. The internalization of the doubts and fears of others follows us and is reinforced all throughout our lives by teachers, parents, siblings, and well-meaning friends who don't want you to get hurt. Have you ever seen a child reach for something on a hot stove only to have him or her have their hand slapped away, only so they can try it again and get slapped away again? There was a time when the parent would let the child get near enough to feel the heat. Then the child would have learned not to touch or to be extremely careful. Nowadays, that kind of parenting is a rare thing. Children are no longer encouraged to learn. They're fed answers rather than taught how to find them. Much of this is due to the fear that the child may be held back, or the doubt that they are capable of learning, or learning how to learn. For parents, there's also the fear and doubt combined that their child or children will be left behind or won't be able to keep up with Susie or Billy or any of the other Joneses. The fear that if kids are given a chance to be children and to learn according to their own strengths and in their own time, that they'll miss out on opportunities, that's the parents' fear. So instead of appreciating the child for who they are, they're frequently pushed, prodded, and medicated into a Stepford oblivion in order to force them to conform to parameters that were dictated by someone else. If this sounds familiar, you're starting to recognize the program. Every one of us needs to decide whether or not we're willing to perpetuate this program. Do you want something truly, organically, holistically better for your children, or will the status quo do? These same questions can and should be asked of each of us with regards to what we want for ourselves. The only time it's too late to change is when we're 6 feet under. Hope and faith. These are the flip side of fear and doubt. They require a literal shift in focus from the potential negatives of their antitheses to the potential positive outcomes you're able to visualize or imagine by becoming the person you were meant to be. These are the core qualities of your life's story's hero. When a negative impulse or thought comes to mind, it must intentionally be countered with positivity born of hope and faith. In time, that negative impulse, like the playground bully who you stood up to all those years ago, will learn it has no place in your life and it will cease to be. It ain't always easy, but it's always worthwhile. Number 7, do what you love. You've got to find what you love, and that is as true for your work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it, keep looking. Don't settle. Steve Jobs. Start small. The above quote was eventually distilled down to one we're all familiar with. Do what you love, the money will follow. Once again, thanks to oversimplification, the true message has gotten lost. I can't help but wonder if this is a conscious or unconscious side effect of our nature. In our quest for a memorable soundbite, the nuances of language get lost, and the entire meaning of a statement or phrase changes. The true damage that this will cause to our species and our continuing acquisition and transmission of knowledge in the long run won't be able to be determined anytime soon. It takes small steps to create a solid foundation. Each stone, brick, and board must be carefully placed and secured before anything can be built. Tend to the details to create a superior vision for yourself and those you love. It's those details that eventually create a big picture. Be mindful. It's really not about controlling every thought. It's about keeping our minds on the thoughts we want to give our energy to. Thought energy is creative energy, and creative energy is the currency of your life, and the universe is your one-stop shop. But it is still up to us to find the best bargain for our energy buck. And this is where mindfulness really plays the biggest part in the creation of your life. To go back to the shopping analogy, mindfulness is like walking into the grocery store with your list in hand, whereas letting your mind go where it wants is simply meandering through the store, knowing you have to make something but have no concept of what that might be. It's your opportunity to focus on the power of your intention, and intention is the energy that breeds manifestation through mindfulness. Set a goal that you can believe you can achieve within a certain time frame. For instance, by next quarter, I want to double my sales numbers. If you're a small business owner, you might have a plan now to do that by refining your target demographic and cutting the advertising fat that doesn't produce. If you're a salesperson on the floor of a store, you might decide to start meandering the store looking for people to engage rather than just hanging out at the register waiting for people to come to you. In the movie The Pursuit of Happiness, Will Smith plays a man so down on his luck that he's living in a public restroom with his son. When he finally scores a job, he sets about strategically utilizing his time to ensure he succeeds to the level of his best expectation. He comes in early, stays later than most, and doesn't hang up the phone between calls, all of which saves him time and earns him higher sales rankings than his peers. In the end, spoiler, he succeeds. He succeeds because he focuses on what he wants and doesn't allow himself to get distracted from what will lead him to success. He focuses his energy. Focusing your energy on your success and exercising mindfulness about what you really want. Is it really financial security you want, or is it a gold toilet seat? And, of course, being honest about it will open you up to opportunities that you might not have noticed before. By staying mindful about your goal and the different aspects of your life or habits that you can change to help you achieve it, you are bringing into your world opportunities that you may not have recognized as such before this moment. Another thing to be mindful about is how it feels, whether it's an unexpected opportunity or part of your plans. If it feels right, and the follow-through for the idea seems to simply flow, then that is a clue that you're on the right track. If, however, it's tedious or a chore that makes you sick to think about carrying through with, you might need to sit down and go through some other ideas because it should not be agony. Whatever you're doing should feel natural and good and in line with the desired outcome, instead of something that cuts into it at cross purposes or tries to force events into a different direction that things weren't meant to go. So now that you have your goal, begin building the reflection of its achievement in your mind. Maybe a new house, envision it from the entryway to the tiles in the bathroom. You don't have to do it all at once. Each detail will undoubtedly have its own moment. But more important than the details of the house itself is the feeling of having it. Feel the satisfaction of having achieved your dream home. Feel the love you'll be able to nurture and the memories for you, your spouse, your kids. See if you can feel the joy of your own grandchildren, filling it up with love and laughter. You've got the goal, increased revenue. You've got the vision, the dream house. You've got the emotions, joy, love, bliss. And all along, you've reminded yourself of all the things in your life that you've already achieved and attained and that you're honestly grateful for. So now you've got the state of being called gratitude. Now, like tending a garden or keeping your yard, it's time to be mindful about how your thoughts and consequently your actions affect your ability to manifest this desire. One of the most difficult things to do is to act like you have something you're working for. So, contrary to what lots of manifestation books will tell you, don't. You're not out to live a lie. You're out to live your truth. If you can't see yourself owning enough cars to have an elevator in your garage to get them up or down to street level, then that's a visualization that's at cross purposes with your nature. If, however, you can envision yourself having 3 or 4 specialty cars that are well cherished, and if that visualization brings you joy instead of difficulty, then there's more likely to be in line with your nature. More is not always better. Quality over quantity may well be the mantra you feel worthy of adoption. Can you expect great things to come to you just because you want them? Of course you can. But the expectation of great things doesn't mean you don't have to put the energy of creation into it. Number 8, become a pragmatic optimist. The first and most important step toward success is the feeling that we can succeed. Nelson Boswell. Take the long view. Life is a long-haul venture. We've been trained to want it now, and if we don't get it now, we throw what our parents used to call a conniption fit. We don't like how we look, we apply makeup. We don't like how we feel, we take a pill. We don't like how our clothes fit, we have liposuction. We don't like our life, we watch someone else's. We're a quick-fix society with everything easily within reach. The remote for life right at our fingertips, and we're not above channel surfing to find something new when we don't like what we see on the TV. The hard and fast truth of things is that quick fixes don't work for the long haul. In order to have anything that lasts, you have to prioritize. If education is what you need to get where you want to go, eventually, then you'll have to prioritize schooling. Trying to maintain the balance between schooling, partying, and socializing is hard enough when you're a college student. But when you're an adult with kids and a spouse or sick family members that you're the primary caregiver for, it's not going to be any easier. But the rewards are well worth the juggling and struggling. The question you must ask yourself is, how much do I really want this? And then it becomes a matter of acting accordingly. Like all the changes discussed here, it's not easy, but it is worth it. Stop. Day by day, we're inundated with television shows that fill our heads with notions of how the other half lives. And yes, we try to emulate that, especially in dialogue and mannerisms. We adopt ways of dressing and speaking and eventually behaving, no matter how ridiculous or detrimental to our relationships it may be, because we see something in the character on the screen that we'd like to see in us. Whether it's the snappy comeback, the glib or cutting remarks meant to blow your enemy or competitor's mind, everyone wants to look, feel, and be considered witty or desirable. What most folks don't realize is that the very dialogue and probably even actions that they're trying to adopt into their own lives have been written and rewritten a handful of times before the final draft gets shot. Sorry to burst your bubble about the lovely land of television, but folks, it's not reality. It's a distillation of contrived circumstances. Even reality TV isn't reality. The people you watch and want to emulate are little more than parodies of themselves and their worst, most reprehensible qualities. This is not a model to try and live up to. It's a warning sign. We cheer when the bad guy or girl gets trounced, and yet we emulate the very behaviors that brought them to their knees when their series finally runs its course. And then we wonder why we're so miserable. It's a literal example of you are who you pretend to be. Of course, on TV, the good guys are boring people who consistently make the most positive choices, lead smoother and more blissful lives. But for entertainment purposes, bliss is boring. Strife sells. Sadism sells. Characters who consistently make the wrong choices make us feel better about ourselves. But if that's the case, why do we adopt, at least on the surface, the very qualities that we abhor? No one can be two people, except Geminis were born for it, of polar opposite natures and create for themselves and those around them a stable and positive life. So the next time you're tempted to slap someone with a cutting remark or a glib retort, or take part in an action whose repercussions won't dissipate with the snap of a marker or the director yelling, "Cut!" do yourself a favor and stop. Think about whether or not what you're about to say or do is going to be constructive or destructive. Peer into the future of your particular circumstances. We all have the ability to anticipate at least some of the consequences of our actions. We just need to get back in touch with that ability. How will you be perceived for what you say or do? Is that the image you want others to have of you? Is that the example you want to set for yourself or those who may look up to you, even though you might not know they exist? Words and actions both have vibrational frequencies that give them power on an energetic level. With that being the case, you become the one who wields the power. How will you use it? Will you use it as a bludgeon that destroys, or will you use that power to create? The choice really is yours. But when life is a mess, it's easier to turn on the tube and ridicule someone else and their so-called trials. The problem with this escapist mentality is that it allows us to neglect our own lives, so that when we're forced to actually live the life we've made, we're often slammed in the face with our disappointments or the effects of our own ennui. Try taking a media sabbatical. Shut off the Facebook alert, shut off the email alert, shut off the TV, even shut off Netflix and YouTube. Try going a weekend, 2 days, 48 hours, only interacting with people face to face, not Facebook to Facebook, and not Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok. Put the media down and back away slowly. If they're not a being with a body in your house or your presence, don't talk with them. Leave them to their own lives for the weekend. Since the advent of social media, we have forgotten the art of being in the moment. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, what's more in the moment than getting an update about my bae's status? What's more in the moment than my best frenemy's latest selfie that makes her look 30 pounds overweight? Those may well be in the moment moments. But when was the last time you took a series of moments to be with yourself? Can you remember the last time you spent quality time with yourself doing what you wanted to do instead of doing what you thought you should be doing based on what others were doing? When was the last time you sat in silence? No TV, no music, no kids, no bae in the background, no pets pawing at the door. How long do you think you could last with only yourself for company? Do you even know yourself well enough to know whether or not you'd enjoy your own company? Perhaps it's time to find out. If spending a weekend on your own is too much of just you, then start with 5 minutes a day. Park in the parking lot, in the back, and just sit there. No music, phone off, nothing to distract you from the sound of your own breathing. Whether they circle or they stream makes no difference. Just let them move. Eventually, they'll spend themselves, and you'll find yourself sitting in silence, feeling the breath moving into and out of your body, feeling your heartbeat, feeling your stomach holding itself tight, feeling your shoulders riding up so high they feel like they're going to climb into your ears. When you notice that, let them drop. They'll creep back up before you know it, then make them drop again. When you've become acclimated to the feel of yourself, the weight of yourself, and the breath of yourself, you can begin to examine the truths of yourself and begin to get to know yourself. Only once you've begun to know yourself can you then begin to see what you want to change about yourself and what parts of yourself that you want to nurture and grow. This is not an easy process, but it is a worthwhile process. Number 9. Turn a deaf ear to your detractors. With great power comes great responsibility, usually attributed to, no, not Spider-Man and not Uncle Ben, but Voltaire. The greatest power you can wield is the power you hold over yourself. We must stop giving our power to others to use against us. The selfishness principle. The primary principle of selfishness. Allow yourself to do both what must be done as well as those great and wonderful things you aspire to do because it feels good and or right. Selfishness isn't necessarily what you've been raised to believe it is. Once more, we've been subjected to oversimplification of an ideal. Most people, when contemplating the idea of selfishness, imagine some kind of gimme or hoarding or self-aggrandizing scenario. This isn't necessarily a true interpretation. In most cases, when the reason for the above kinds of actions are considered, at the root of those reasons is some kind of lack, and even sometimes self-loathing. But there is a flip side to selfishness that is more altruistic in the long run. We've all heard, if you don't take care of yourself first, then how can you take care of someone else? This is usually heard more through caregiver and healthcare professional channels, and it's usually in reference to overworked, overstressed, overtaxed moms. There are some dads who fit the bill, and it applies to them as well. It also applies to spouses caring for an ailing partner, or adult children now faced with the needs of aging and frequently ailing parents. But it also applies to the single person, the busy friend, the activist neighbor. In short, it applies to everyone and anyone at any given time. There are times when it's necessary to go that extra mile and get something done, even though it may tax our resources more than we'd like. Those are the moments and those are the events that often help us evolve as individuals, and let's be honest, sometimes those moments make us feel like we're being the better aspect of ourselves, and we probably are. But when we're drained, angry, snappish, and snippy, and just not feeling right, those are the times we have to learn to recognize and weigh our own welfare against the altruistic payment we get from doing that good deed that we didn't really want to do, but did anyway. It comes down to health, both physical and mental, and learning how to take those moments of quietude to get to know yourself is one of the best ways to get to know when it's time to recharge and time to just do what must be done. Tummy signals and emotions. Emotions are the key to learning how to listen to our inner selves and our alignment with the universe. Your emotions are the first biofeedback mechanism we have that tells us whether we're doing something right or something wrong, whether what we're doing is something good for us or bad for us, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Our body sends us signals. That squirrely feeling in your tummy, that loose, heavy feeling in the bowels, the cold, clammy feelings are typical physiological responses to some kind of anticipated negative impact on a person's system. As a child, I'd heard people saying, "Listen to your guts. Your guts will tell you what's right or wrong." But no one ever told me how to listen to them. So I moved through daily life thinking that my instincts didn't really give a damn about my daily life. And like a typical little sister, I pushed and pushed until I got a belly response. Of course, usually by the time my belly did say something about what I was doing to tell me it was wrong, I was already in trouble. So even though to a lot of folks it's kind of duh, here it is. When your belly isn't saying much of anything, you're more than likely on the right track. Now, if you're on that right track and you make a decision and suddenly your tummy is doing bad kinds of acrobatics, that cold, clammy, nauseating in a bad way kind, remember you do have the option of changing your mind as long as you haven't followed through on the decision yet. You can stop and change direction. This will bring your tummy back into a neutral state of non-reactivity. Of course, then again, we all come to those moments where our tummies are going to go crazy because of something positive. Positive excitement can make you feel nauseous, but you probably won't mind it, whereas negative emotion, nausea, will make you want to crawl in a hole and not come out. The occasionally confusing thing about the body's signals is that for something positive or negative, the physiologic response might be nearly identical, which is why we have emotions to further guide our decision-making process. Use the happiness, the joyful anticipation, the color of the emotion that accompanies the body signals if you're not sure what you're planning is the right thing or not. Think in terms of a marriage proposal. Guys, you've found the woman of your dreams. You're absolutely certain she's the one you want to wake up with for the rest of your life. And in spite of the fact that your belly is dancing like a leprechaun that just got his gold back, the image that comes to you that you just can't wait for is that warm, glowy, faraway day when you're both old and wrinkly and couldn't be happier for the decades together. Of course, if your first reaction to the idea of marrying her, ladies, this is applicable to you too, is kind of colorless and cold like the bottom of the Mariana Trench and you can't see anything but lead weights around your ankles, you might want to reconsider. Men actually understand the difference better than women do in a lot of cases. Thoughtful men, I'm talking about the kind of thoughtful that weighs implications against as many aspects of their lives as possible. Will also pay attention to how the woman of their choice makes them feel. Women often have a tendency, still, to put aside how a man makes them feel, especially when contemplating his ability to provide for offspring. Fortunately, in today's world, we can begin to consider partnering with someone for real love and fulfillment rather than out of desperation, fear, or social pressure. Fear of being alone is one of the biggest reasons for marrying someone against your body's wishes. There's a reason why experts propone that it's best to date for at least a year before getting married. Give the oxytocin a chance to die down so that you can see each other without rose-colored glasses on. Strip away the idea that either of you is going to change the other, because that ain't going to happen. And see if those warts are something you can live with. If he or she has a habit that makes you want to scream a month into the dating, then the lifetime, it's not going to work. On the subject of marriage, a lot of people also make the mistake of marrying because they feel obligated to, either to the other person or because of some social expectation. Again, the fact is, if you haven't married that person yet, there's probably a reason. Do both of you the honor and respect of deep consideration before folding to outward pressure. See Chapter 8 on that one. So while this is just an example, it's a pertinent one since marriage is a huge change. It's another opportunity to listen to your body, your belly, not that wonderful land of blissful sensation between your legs, and your emotions, and make the best choice possible for all parties concerned. Marrying out of fear of being alone or because of societal, family, or peer pressure will rarely, if ever, merit positive results for the future, i.e., offspring. The above is just one way to use the pairing of emotion with physiologic response to achieve the most fulfilling possible outcome. The habit of separating our emotions from our chosen course of action in the name of productivity or the almighty dollar has become a quality employers seek. But in this moment, look at the fate of the employers who espouse such ectomy of self as a virtue. They're failing and falling. This isn't to say that if your passion is law, that you have to give it up in order to bring yourself into alignment with your universal harmony. Maybe it just means that you need to consider a change from being a prosecutor to a defense attorney, or vice versa. There are options and ways and means to feed your passions and allow them to feed your life, while staying true to both who you are and who you will become. In order to pass forward a legacy of true choice, you must first make your own. The moment, it's mutable. Who you are today is a stepping stone to who you will be tomorrow. Fulfillment doesn't always mean riches or status or being the one the Joneses have to keep up with. Fulfillment is only one element that comprises the ability to look in your own eyes in the mirror in the morning or at night and know you held true to what you know is right inside. It's part of the ability to sleep soundly knowing you did the best you could today. It's part of the ability to enjoy a meal with your family and go to your kid's soccer match without worrying if the coach is an ass or an asset, or if your kid is going to be scarred for life because he or she got benched. It's knowing that when you get home from the game, you can say to your child, "You did great today," and mean it because today they did as great as they could, and you understand that. It's also the ability to assure those kids of yours that tomorrow will bring them more opportunities to see what they can do better or how they can do it better. This is where the brightest part of you really gets to shine into the future. Embrace it, love it, and when necessary, cry because holding those boundaries for those kids can sometimes hurt more than you can imagine. But the only thing you absolutely must do is never let them forget that you love them, and sometimes love means saying no. So the point is, use your emotions as a barometer. That's what they're there for. 10. Let others bear their own baggage. You have enough to carry. We all know people who just love to spew their misfortune into the air around everyone they can. We know people who love to deflate your day because, as we also know, misery loves company. Some of them are friends, some are family members, others are co-workers, and some are simply grumpy people we may meet on the street or in the grocery store or anywhere. These are the people that have a tendency to perpetuate their own misery by not making changes to their own lives. And as their misery compounds with inaction over inaction, they love to engage you in carrying some of their burden. They lay their troubles on you as if you're a pack mule, then seem to either wind up flitting about like butterflies in a breeze, once they've unloaded on you, of course, or they continue to drag everyone around them down. We've called them energy vampires in the past. You know who they are. They're the ones that suck the life and joy out of a room faster than Homer Simpson can scarf down a donut. And whenever they call to say, "Let's go out," or "Come on over," your heart skips a beat and your tummy starts to squirm, an unmistakable message that warns, don't do it. And yet we do. It's a horribly difficult thing to tell a friend that you don't want to hear their problems. But I'm not talking about the kind of venting that most friends do when they first get together. You sit down, you talk about what's bugging you, hash it out, then once the emotional charge is worn off, you laugh about it and move on to subjects that make you happy. That's normal. If it tends to be more that you sit down and your friend starts venting and won't let you get a word in edgewise, and it's about the same thing over and over and over ad infinitum, but their behavior about the situation doesn't change, that is when they're putting their troubles on you and letting you carry them. These are the kind of people who brush off what's going on in your life when you need to vent and turn the conversation back to themselves and their own troubles. No matter how serious or silly your problem may be, they simply don't give what's bothering you any credence or weight. Sadly, this is an indicator of how much or how little they respect you. Everyone needs to talk out their troubles once in a while, and that's one of the things that friends are for, whether it be your life partner or just someone you meet for lunch a few times a year and chat with. You spend time with that person, presumably because you enjoy their company, and hopefully they enjoy yours. But sometimes their actions prove that they're more interested in you as a verbal whipping post than as an equal. That is when it's time to advise them about your feelings. Having to tell someone that you feel as if they don't care about your problems, that you feel as if they only want to hang out when they have something they need to get off their chest, and that makes you feel as if they don't care for you as much as you care for them, is beyond difficult. Your friend will most likely at first be defensive, then get angry, and possibly even storm out. If you can accept any of these actions, then you can feel confident in talking with them about your feelings. One of the hardest things to do is to keep the conversation from being confrontational and accusatory. Friends, lovers, and even family members have been lost because of conversations gone awry. Part of the problem, which has already been touched on earlier in Chapter 9 and even so far back as Chapters 1 and 2, is that the people in your life have their own scripts, their own programs, that they are impelled and sometimes compelled to adhere to. In other words, they just can't help themselves. And they really can't. The only person who can tell you that you're ready for change is yourself. And if your friends or family members or coworkers or whoever your personal energy vampire is can't or won't respect your feelings, then sometimes it's better to take some time away. With friends, you might find it easier than you think to walk away and let them live their own lives while you move forward with yours. The fact is, when a friendship has reached its end, walking away from it can be like stepping out of a pair of old, worn-out flip-flops. Before the previous paragraph is read as an encouragement to use people and toss them away once they no longer serve you or your purpose, it's not. Friendships come and go. They have their time, and that time has to be recognized as something special and necessary. But we do outgrow or simply move in different directions after a while, and that's not a bad thing at all. It just means that you were where you needed to be, and so was that other person. Coworkers are a different story. Most often, it's easier to simply pull back little by little without having to address the situation. That is, of course, as long as the situation isn't something that drives you stark raving mad or has jeopardized your standing among your superiors or peers. Family tends to be where it gets toughest. There are a couple different schools of thought on the subject, one being they're your family so you have to keep loving you no matter what, and the other being they're family so they'll never change, so why should I bother? There is a third option that everyone fears at some point or another, and that is they'll kick me out or disown me. Although that third one is rare, it does happen, and it's up to the individual to decide whether or not it's an outcome that's worth the risk. The thing about family, though, is that it's easier to understand a family member's position on something because you know their history and therefore their programming. For example, if your parents were raised deeply religious and because of that they forced you to go to a religious school and now they want you to go to a religious university or they won't pay for your continuing education, then it's up to you to decide which sacrifice you'll make if they absolutely refuse to discuss any other option. Most of the time, people, even parents, will come around if they're presented with sound information. I don't like using the word arguments because you're trying not to argue. You're trying to logically and rationally provide information to support your stance. Arguments tend to come along anyway, so I'd rather not encourage them here. And if you've made your case and they still cannot deviate from their own programming, then it's up to you to accept that they're not in a position to change at that time. Hopefully the love will always be there so that as time does go by and you live the sound, ethical, moral, upstanding life that you choose, those around you will be able to see that the changes and growth you've attained have only made you someone they're more proud to have around. Basic tools. Some of the most basic tools that are available to help bring about the destiny you choose have been taught and advocated for years, if not centuries. The first is probably the longest-lived tool among humans, and that is meditation. Wikipedia defines meditation as meditation is a practice where an individual trains the mind or induces a mode of consciousness either to realize some benefit or for the mind to simply acknowledge its content without becoming identified with that content, or as an end to itself. The term meditation refers to a broad variety of practices that include techniques designed to promote relaxation, build internal energy or life force, chi, ki, prana, etc., and develop compassion, love, patience, generosity, and forgiveness. And it continues with, the word meditation carries different meanings in different contexts. Meditation has been practiced since antiquity as a component of numerous religious traditions and beliefs. Meditation often involves an internal effort to self-regulate the mind in some way. Meditation is often used to clear the mind and ease many health concerns, such as high blood pressure, depression, and anxiety. It may be done sitting or in an active way, for instance. Buddhist monks involve awareness in their day-to-day activities as a form of mind training. Prayer beads or other ritual objects are commonly used during meditation in order to keep track of or remind the practitioner about some aspect of their training. There are a myriad variety of meditative practices as well as reasons to meditate, as you can see from the above quote. Another technique that's been touched on, however fleetingly, is creative visualization, the ability to see yourself doing things that represent the changes you want to make in your life. The subconscious mind works in symbols, not words. That's why you can show anyone on the planet, except perhaps a few certain tribes that refuse contact with outsiders, a drawing of a toilet, and they'll get the idea of what you're talking about. Our subconscious mind understood symbols, colors, textures, tastes, and smells long before our brains were made to understand words. So it only makes sense that coupling meditative practices with symbolism of your idea of success, power, wealth, security, or love would make these things more attainable to you. Synesthesia. Synesthesia is a condition in which the individual may see the number 5, but see it in the color green, or maybe even sometimes while smelling oranges. It's a sort of cross-wiring of the input devices. I believe that in some ways we are all synesthetes. We all have had experiences in which the scent of something will trigger a memory, sometimes with full sound or vision or both. Take a moment to write down what you experience when you think about baking chocolate chip cookies or your mother's perfume. Write what you smell, any underlying scents that come along in a secondary way. Write sounds that come with the memory of the scent, and even go so far as to try to remember any physical sensations, like the warm gooiness of a hot cookie falling apart in your hand. If you can't think of anything or aren't stimulated by the idea of foods, then think of a moment of warmth and comfort, softness, and try to remember the scent that comes along with it. And most importantly, remember how you felt inside. Another method you can use is something like the vision board that was touted in The Secret. Just as we put up pictures of skinny people on the fridge when we're dieting, or muscular people, or both, to help remind us of what we want for ourselves, the idea of the vision board is simply to help us keep our goals in mind. It's actually up to the individual to make those things happen by taking action. Another part of using pictures of a person who isn't yourself is that it isn't you. The house you put on your vision board isn't yours, not necessarily. It's not necessarily your vision. It's someone else's, and therein lies the problem. The best visualizations you can obtain are those that come from within. If you can't visualize yourself thin or muscular, then imagine the feeling of it. Are you light on your feet? Can you bend over to tie your shoes, assuming some people still do that, without feeling like you have to hold your breath to do so? Can you imagine striding through your house in your underwear and not feeling the jiggle that you're not supposed to? Can you feel yourself carrying your grocery bags as though they were no more than the weight of a blanket? Can you imagine maneuvering with grace and stamina through a crowd of people, or just through your day? Can you imagine wearing a t-shirt that fits snugly across your body and accentuates your muscles instead of your not muscles? Whatever your goal is, if you have to start by using pictures of someone else or the idea of wealth and security to start the ball rolling before you learn to visualize these things for yourself, or whether you can make these images on your own from the get-go, the important thing is to use this technique in conjunction with meditation. These two methods together will provide you with the most powerful internal motivation that you can experience. Another method that can help you is the Kappas Mental Bank method. This method uses the ideomotor skill of cursive writing combined with a mental monetary reward that activates rudimentary math skills. All you need to do is be able to do the basic 4: add, subtract, multiply, and divide, which further helps you embed your goals and strategies into your subconscious mind, making success all the more readily attainable that much more quickly. Utilizing all of these techniques will help you stay focused on your vision, help you clarify the end results you want while keeping your mind on working out how to overcome the obstacles that are anticipated, as well as those that will inevitably pop into existence. Why failure really happens. Development coach and entrepreneur John Assaraf, The Secret, Praxis Neuroscience, has a really neat way of explaining why failure really happens. His model is the exact result of those indoctrinations I talked about in Chapter 6. Your concept of who you are must be in line with the goals you want to achieve. If you can see yourself having, doing, and being your ideal, then you can achieve it. But first you must control the demons of your indoctrination. You must tame those voices that tell you you're not good enough, or too fat, or too ugly, or don't deserve success. If you can't control those ideas that were placed in your head by others, the "who do you think you are, you don't have what it takes," then you'll never be able to move out of the status quo, which is exactly where your subconscious believes you should be because it constantly hears the rhetoric of your indoctrination. You have been brainwashed by others to continue brainwashing yourself so that you will always be exactly who and what someone else wants you to be. One of the reasons the vast majority of self-help devices, services, and advocates espouse meditation and visualization to help you achieve your goals is because it works. Initially, it may be difficult to see yourself moving into a 50,000 square foot mansion or running a corporation. But through meditation and visualization techniques, you can build at your own pace a vision of that life that fits with the obtaining of the small, attainable goals you've set up from Chapter 4. These meditative and visualization exercises help change the way you perceive yourself and what you're worthy of. When I was a teenager, my stepdad told me that yoga was a tool of Satan and that if I did it, I would go to hell. There were a lot of things he told me I was going to go to hell for. He claimed that because it induced an altered state of mind, that it allowed Satan to come into your consciousness, and that by voluntarily altering your state of mind, you were welcoming possession. Never mind the fact that sleep, alcohol, music, dance, and many other activities, as well as a few substances, are also mind-altering, and yet not commonly considered avenues for possession by Satan. I scoffed, and being the precocious child I was, told him that I'd save him a seat on the way down. It wasn't until later that I made the connection between his own indoctrination about religion, self-loathing, and fear of change that I began to understand why he could have said what he did. No matter which way I looked at it, the end reason was fear of one kind or another. Fear of change is something we all have to deal with at some point in time or another, simply because changing leads to something that is largely unknown or uncertain. Keep in mind, though, that if you have your plan, and if you are taking those small steps toward reaching your goal, you are building certainty. You are building a path to a certain destination from which you will be building another path to another destination. And once you know where you're going and know how you plan to get there, the uncertainty factor no longer exists. You are creating a new known aspect to your life. fear can no longer hold sway over you. Epilogue. Life is choice. Anonymous. It's human nature to seek personal fulfillment. It's because of this desire that the world is full of self-help gurus and systems, many of which have helped many people, but none of which have worked for everyone who has tried them. Almost every single one of them give the same advice. What differs are the methods of obtaining the promised results. One of the reasons there are so many methods is because the ways in which we learn are so myriad and as varied as people are. How we connect with information goes hand in hand with how readily that information is absorbed and whether or not it's applied. My name is J.A. Carlton. At the time of this writing, I'm a 27-year veteran of the healthcare field. I started out in the 90s as a massage therapist, then in the 2000s became a radiologic technologist. In 2014, I became a hypnotherapist, and now am an LMRT, or Limited Medical Radiologic Technician instructor in Austin, Texas. Since my early teens, I've been practicing ways of exerting autonomy and creating a life of satisfaction and fulfillment free of the judgments and expectations of others. The information contained here has been compiled and personally tested over a lifetime. Any health advice is not intended to supplant or replace information and the input of your medical provider. Any emotional, intellectual, or psychological insights are not intended to supplant or replace interactions with whatever advisor you choose. This has been At the Crossroads, The Destiny of Choice by J.A. Carlton, narrated by Jill Carlton.